Good morning. Please join me in this morning's responsive reading, which you can find in your order of service. May the doors of this sanctuary be wide enough to receive all who hunger.
May it welcome all who have cares to unburden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture.
May the doors of this sanctuary be narrow enough to shut out pettiness, pride, and fear.
May its thresholds be no stumbling block to young or straying feet.
May they be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and envy.
May this sanctuary be, for all who enter, a doorway to a richer and more meaningful life.
My name is Gary Eberly, and I am obviously a member of the choir and also on your governing board. I've also been quite involved here over the years, the past 30 years, in adult education and programming. 2 weeks ago, I was in Boston, and while there, I went to services at the Old South Church, which is near my hotel, and was known for its music program. So I thought I would go check out the competition. The new Old South Church was built in the 1870s, so it is an new Old South Church, but is still newer than the original Old South Church, which is actually somewhat east of the new Old South Church, yet somewhat southeast of the Old North Church, which is in the northeastern part of Boston, and was the church from which the lanterns were hung, one if by land and two if by sea. Old South is on the Freedom Trail. The original is a historic site, and it was the meeting house from which the original Tea Partiers took off for the Boston Wharf. And among the early members of that Old South Church were Samuel Sewell, who became a persecutor of witches up in Salem in the 1690s, the Franklin family, including young Ben, before he moved to Philadelphia, Sam Adams and other patriots, and the first African-American woman poet, Phyllis Wheatley. So it's a very historic place. The music was pretty good, but what sticks with me was the key line. I would say the music was pretty good, but not better than what we get here from week to week. The key line of the sermon came from Paul's letter to the Philippians: work out your own salvation in fear and trembling. And I don't know if it was just because it was New England or what, but I kept thinking of sinners in the hands of an angry God as the sermon went out. And the phrase, however, stuck with me: work out your own salvation in fear and trembling, because that's what we do here. The past 2 months, Fred's been doing a wonderful job of talking about the history of this place all the way back to 1857, through wars and civil wars and the burning of a building and the recovery from that and the Great Depression. And somehow this place carried on. And we don't have 400 years of history as they do out east, but we have history. And our history is working it out ourselves. We don't have a denominational affiliation. We're not dominated by a top-down hierarchy like the Catholic Church, where the bishop and the hierarchy passes edicts down from the top. We don't have 39 articles of belief that we subscribe to. In other words, we're working without a safety net. We are it. It's an interesting place to be when you're attempting to work out your own salvation and to figure out for yourself what salvation means. We're free to think and say what we please around here, and that's all well and good, but if you say and think what you please, you're going to get an argument from somebody else who thinks differently, and that's why we're here. Well, right now we have 3 extraordinary opportunities in the next couple of weeks that I hope you will take advantage of. The first one is, since I'm a member of the governing board, I have to remind you, this is pledge season. Not all of us can be John Blodgett. There's a nice plaque over here, and Blodgett's name is in gold leaf and is on several buildings around town, as are other big donors. Those days, I think, are gone. And as we look around the room, we have to ask the question, can we get $100,000 from one person, or can we get $1,000 from 100 people? It amounts to the same. So everyone, please take your pledge card and contribute. The second extraordinary opportunity is it is the third year, or it's been 3 years since the last senior minister evaluation, You should receive, and I hope you have received already by email, a survey that allows you to carry on with the board a conversation about the senior minister's performance, and then we have a conversation with him and give him the feeling and the temperature of the congregation. This is extraordinary for someone like myself, raised in the Catholic Church, where you're simply given and you take what you get. It's fate, right? We're also trying to do this here at Fountain Street, raising money and so on, without damnation and without much guilt beyond the normal liberal guilt that we carry. This makes it a real challenge. The third opportunity will be voting for members of the governing board. We are presenting you with a slate of 8, and of those we will choose 5 members who will go on to the 15-person governing board starting in January. So take all this seriously, right? We're engaged, we're here. It's just us, folks, and that's our history. So welcome to Fountain Street Church.
And as it happens, there's an interesting passage I want to give to you today from the book of Genesis. It's not that called for in either Christian or Jewish churches, but as I contemplated the words I wanted to say, this is the image that came to mind. It comes out of the 9th chapter. In this chapter, Rebekah is pregnant. She is Isaac's spouse. And Isaac prayed to God for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her. She was carrying twins. And she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of God, and God said to her, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided, and one shall be stronger than the other." Mark Twain, who never had more than 2 kind words in a row, but nevertheless is ever entertaining, at one point said it could probably be shown by facts and figures that there is no distinctly Native American criminal class except Congress. The contemporary writer P.J. O'Rourke writes, "The Democrats are the party that say government will make you smarter, taller, richer, and remove the crabgrass from your lawn. The Republicans are the party that say government doesn't work and then get elected and prove it." Writer Matt Taibbi, who is author of several important works, less humorously but just as trenchantly says, "Washington politicians basically view the people as a capricious and dangerous enemy, a dumb mob whose only interesting quality happens to be their power to take away politicians' jobs. When the government sees its people as the enemy, sooner or later that feeling gets to be mutual, and that's when the real weirdness begins." That came to mind often this past week. Mary Wollstonecraft of the 18th century, mother of Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. So we're talking an 18th century woman who wrote in defense of the rights of women, made this comment long ago. "England and America owe their liberty to commerce, which created a new species of power to undermine the feudal system. But let them beware of the consequences. The tyranny of wealth is more galling and debasing than that of rank." With those words, I shall begin. Maybe it was an omen, but on my flight back from Albuquerque last week, which was on Election Day, I had the bumpiest landing I've ever had in my life. It was a careening drop through the rain and the clouds, and more than one person was holding up the airplane with their knuckles gripping the side of the seat. I would be one of them. Maybe it was a metaphor for, because by the time I got back to Grand Rapids, which was on 3 different airplanes instead of 2, and none of them the one I thought I was going to ride on, the election results seemed just about as chaotic and unpredictable as my airplane rides. Of course, we all heard by the pundits, that important class of people who get paid for talking out of one side of their mouth, that the GOP had the advantage, but we never expected it would be so overwhelmingly so. For those whose loyalties tend toward the left, it really was a bumpy night, wasn't it? But we did land. Wednesday came, and it was pretty much like any other Wednesday if you didn't watch the news programs. Cars still ran, businesses still operated, children went to school and came home in one piece. It was sunny, in fact. Down at Rosa Parks Circle, it was the first Wednesday, and we went down there to stand up for marital equality, as we have done every month for several years. Of course, that was the day before Thursday, which is when the 6th District said, keep on marching, because apparently same-sex marriage is legitimately illegal in Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, and Kentucky, unlike other states in the Union. That was 2 tough days in 1 week as far as I'm concerned. And of course, those of us who live on the green side of Michigan added a 3rd one last night. We feel bad for our Spartans. It was a tough week. I am, in fact, interrupting the series that Gary alluded to of sermons on the history of the church, which is also the history of liberal religion. I'm doing it because there are plenty of people out there who would like to hear what preachers have to say after the election rather than before, because now I'm not predicting, I'm consoling. Plenty of people out there on TV will tell you how it all happened and put numbers up on screens and visuals on floors, and you'll get to watch figures go back and forth all day long. They will tell you how it happened. I'm going to tell you why. And fortuitously, it is involved with another story, the story that involves those people who gave us our other November icon, Thanksgiving. I'm talking about the Pilgrims in Plymouth. When the Mayflower landed in 1620, they were not alone on the boat. There was a crew, of course, but there were another group of people, smaller, who were members of what were called the London Merchant Adventurers. These were not swashbuckling people with swords and sashes, but members of a company that were out to make a buck. Because after all, the Pilgrims couldn't pay the way all the way across the ocean, so the people financing the trip sent some of their people to go and find wealth in the New World. We don't hear much about them. We only hear about the Pilgrims and their funny hats and the buckles on their shoes and the turkeys they didn't eat and the Indians they didn't like. But we get one reference in the early days. On Christmas Day in 1621, exactly a year after they landed, the Governor Bradford, chided, scolded the adventurers, the non-members of the church, people he called strangers as opposed to members of the church called saints. No, they meant that in earnest, by the way. He chided them for being idle on a work day. For to the Puritan, Christmas Day was a popish, meaning Catholic, remnant of a pagan practice, meaning get drunk and have a good time day. And if you're a Puritan, nothing is more offensive than Catholicism or fun. But my point here is that from the very first, there were two groups of people that came from Europe to the United States, to America. People who wanted to create an ideal community, whether they were the Holy Commonwealth of the Puritans that Gary visited a piece of and touched on with the history there. But there were also many others, notably Quakers, who quietly created Pennsylvania. But let's also remember Catholics came to Maryland so they could worship and not be afflicted by the Puritans who lived in England. And Jews who were welcome nowhere made their way to Rhode Island and Savannah, Georgia, and all sorts of places where finally they could have an ounce of rest. Mennonites in the Amish form filled in the cracks in various places. So there were many groups who came to this continent hoping that they could live a more holy life, a more peaceful, a more perfect life, one that was untroubled by the secular world and all of its sins. And right alongside them, on the same boat, as it turned out, there were the adventurers who were here to make a buck, to strike it rich, sometimes just to get out of town before the police caught up with them. So we were a land of Puritans and pioneers from the beginning. Scholar and historian Sidney Mead wrote a book I had to read years ago called The Nation with the Soul of a Church. And I think he's right, but I think he's only half right. I think we have two souls in America. One of them is very sacred and holy and aspiring and idealistic, that of the Puritan, the Thanksgiving turkey, the Holy Commonwealth, the we the people stuff. And then we also have the pioneer, the straw, the plow that broke the plains, the lawless gunman as opposed to the gunless lawman, the robber baron, and the inventor. Both of these are Americans, both of them equally American from the very beginning of European encroachment here. And what we have there is a story very like that in Genesis, in which we have two children growing in this fabled story, Jacob and Esau. And Esau is the oldest, but Jacob deals him out of his birthright. They have a terrible sibling rivalry. And I think that's what we have in America. We have two souls vying for, I'm more American than you are. We have the Puritan with its lofty aspirations for a holy commonwealth. We hear it in words like, we, the people of the United States, in order to form. Oh, what a fantastic sentiment that is, that sense that we can be one people united by these great ideals. But let's remember that another variation on that theme would be the puritanical blue laws that we all had to endure as children when someone said, we are all one community whether you like it or not. You must go to church, and if you don't go to church, stay home. The Comstock Act of 1873 made sure that people didn't get obscene things in the mail, meaning birth control information. So that flip side, the variation on the theme of the Holy Commonwealth is the puritanical people who wish to tell you what to think and how to feel. And we chafe at that. That's when our pioneer gets its back up. But then we think about the people who went out there and broke the plains and set up the cities and created virtually every state other than the first 13. But let's remember, if you went out into Dodge City, Kansas on the wrong side of town, you'd find yourself with a hole in yourself and no one to take you to court. And every robber baron in America got rich by making a whole lot of people really poor. Because after all, this is the land of opportunity. If you don't get it, that's your blessed problem, isn't it? You can feel the tension between them. The holy commonwealth in which we all care for one another, even if we're peeking in each other's doors. Or the pioneer and the cowboy who's out there doing whatever he or she wants, and the devil take the hindmost, including you if you happen to get in the way. These two themes exist even now in our struggles that we hear in politics around individual freedom versus community responsibility, justice and liberty, opportunity and other things. Sometimes they merge. During the Civil War and the Great Depression, our existence was threatened, and we somehow put down the hostility and soldier on, as we sometimes say. But as soon as the threat recedes, like siblings always do, we fall back to quarreling with each other. No, I'm the eldest. No, I'm the smartest. No, I'm the most loved. And that's my second point. Not only do we have two souls, we will always have two souls. So much so that when one comes to dominate the other for a while, the other inevitably begins to make a comeback. For example, during the Great Depression, as I mentioned earlier, we found a way to suppress our individuality. We all had to get through the Depression and get through the war. But after the war, when things began to settle down, people wanted to break out a little bit. And we saw that in the liberals of that day, which were think of them as the Bohemians, the Beatniks, the Allen Ginsbergs, the Jack Kerouacs, and then rock and roll music and the sexual revolution. And then by the end of this long arc of individualism, what do we get? The internet entrepreneur and the Tea Party. It's the same voice run riot, if you wish. When one soul, one spirit gains dominance, it inevitably goes from ideal to real to dominant to parody. You judge whether or not we are in that stage between dominance and parody. But the reality is, each time one reaches an overripe position in our society, the other one inevitably asserts itself. We can't do without it. We refuse to become a single-spirited soul in nation, because either ideal is only half of who we are. Think of it as like walking through time. The nation has two legs, and if you've ever tried to take two steps with the same leg, you'll realize how little distance you can go. Of course, you could tie one leg down to a stake to keep it from going anywhere, but what you'll do is you'll end up walking in circles over and over again. And if I have a concern about our nation, is that we think we're moving forward when in fact we're walking around in circles right now, because one side is being tamped down so consistently that we can no longer have the byplay, the back and the forth, the dialogue between the Puritan and the pioneer. We know how it happens. It's the gerrymandering and the endless campaign and the 24-hour news cycle. But the result is that we have lots of heat and dust, but no progress. And of course, the voters will eventually, in some way, choose to unfetter that other leg. And as Alfred North Whitehead once observed so long ago, all great ideas enter the world with disgusting alliances, meaning when it first shows up, no one will like it, but it will be there. The outlier, the outsider, the marginalized one. Through that voice will come the next iteration of our other spirit. So the good news I'm bringing you today is if you don't like the way things are going now, it will not stay that way. Whether we will be here to see the change is a question of how much we are willing to put up with it for how long. But you can be sure, at some point we will have all had enough of whatever it is that's too much now, and things will change. My second good message to you is that our hope lies not in defeating the other, whoever the other is, but in yoking them both together. We can no more do without the one than the other. Jacob and Esau are related, after all, and they did make up later in life. Puritan and pioneer are both required for America. Liberal and conservative, Republican and Democrat, rich and poor, black and white, men and women, gay and straight, young and old, religious and secular, rural and urban, flyover country and both coasts, all are required for America to thrive. Long ago, that wonderful fellow, Paul of Tarsus, advised the community in Corinth, who were arguing over which ones were better than others, and said, "As it is, there are many members, yet one body." Do you hear where I'm going, people? The eye cannot say to the hand, "I have no need of you." Likewise, the conservative cannot say to the liberal, "You don't belong in this country." Although you may have heard that, it is not true, nor is the opposite, I should point out. Nor can the head say to the feet, "I have no need of you." The rich cannot dispose of the poor, nor the poor of the rich. So to you, if you happen to be one of my fellow liberals, I say, take heart and be glad, even today, even if what you wished for did not happen, because like it or not, we have neighbors and friends and relatives who are rejoicing today, and shall we deprive them of their pleasure? I think not. I am not being ironic, because at some moment we will be in defeat, and we should be willing to take our care of them. What did they used to say? Be magnanimous in victory and gracious in defeat, because both of us will live to struggle another day. Obliterating the other is not possible, not wise, not wanted. It is to kill your brother or your sister. So let us be magnanimous when we win and gracious in our defeat, to cheer on those who beat us and promise that we shall give them as good as we got another time, because America is larger than its parts or its parties, and we must never forget that we represent not all but some. Nonetheless, we are a part. Our two souls make us a great nation, because every generation is a new variation on the themes of America, the themes we all know and love and say every day in our hearts: liberty and justice for all. May these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.